I quit the HOA and my home doubled in value, posted by Gurdon too. About 20 years ago, my uncle acquired and bought an apartment in a new fancy condo. Each floor was separated in 2 apartments, except for the top floor, which was a single apartment more than double the size, with a private attic. All other units had a storage area in the basement. He got the top floor. The building had a large common hall and a large yard all around it, so the owners decided to create an HOA to maintain the common areas and protect the property value. My uncle has always been an independent man, so he wasn't keen on the idea, but he recognized it was necessary. However, he proposed an article in the statute allowing any member to recede from the HOA by paying a contribution and entering a limited agreement. People under this contract would not be in the HOA, but would be required to contribute to common expenses like light, cleaning, administration, and so on, and maintenance, although in this case the HOA was required to confront their respective quotes for the job before proceeding. Since the votes were based on surface owned, and he thus had the swing vote, the rule was included in the statute. A couple of years go by without a hitch, and the HOA works as planned. A couple more units are sold, and everything is fine and dandy. Enter Karen. My uncle describes Karen as your worst high school teacher with a resting bee face like she was constantly smelling sewage. In reality, she was a plain woman in her 50s, dirty blonde, single, and a pocket dog and 2 cats, with a mildly annoyed expression frozen on her face and the fashion sense of Dolores Umbridge. Although after starting reading Reddit posts, I'm having a hard time not superimposing the classic Karen hairstyle on her. She was one of the original owners, but never had much interaction with the others. The first time my uncle took any notice of her was when she tried to introduce a rule preventing children from playing in the common hall because their rowdiness and the prospective damage they could cause might decrease property value. My uncle didn't like participating in the meetings, and he didn't have kids yet, but that time he intervened, saying that he'd rather have happy kids around, even if that meant losing a bit of value, and proposed creating an emergency fund for the accidental damage instead. Karen was outvoted. While they were leaving the conference room, she threw a look at him like she was about to breathe fire on him. He disliked and distrusted her from that moment on. Karen tried several times to pass more restrictive rules, but she kept getting outvoted, even thanks to my uncle's double vote. But at the same time, she was doing something else. She was buying additional units and forcing her rules onto her tenants, including those regarding the common areas. So that meant that her tenants' kids couldn't play with the other kids in the common hall. For instance, this one was nearly impossible to enforce, and it did lead to complaints. Over time, thanks to her by now 4 votes, Karen got a seat in the HOA. That was an alarm bell for my uncle, who filed to leave the HOA, as per his own article, on the same day. And not a moment too soon, as that article was canceled even before his request was processed. The HOA then initially denied his request, and he had to sue and go to arbitration to prove that he had filed his request before the rule was expunged. But from that moment, he was free. Over the next couple of years, he had to go to arbitration twice more. Once because the HOA demanded payment for a renovation without giving him the chance to present an alternate quote, and once because Karen and her newfound clique kept harassing him with fines that he didn't have to pay. He won both times, and Karen was beyond hate. Every time they met each other, she looked at him with such a contempt that he actually started fearing for his safety. In this period, Karen's increasingly restrictive rules had caused a high turnover, both of tenants and of owners. Even if everything was still in pristine condition, and Karen was very good at that, the HOA rules were a hard sell. This had decreased the value of the apartments a lot, and Karen used this to buy even more lots. She ended up with 6 total. When my aunt got pregnant, they decided that the condo was not really kid-friendly anymore, so they decided to sell. As I mentioned, the property value had dropped in recent years, but evidently not my uncle's apartment. When he put it on the market, he advertised it as free from the local HOA. He ended up selling it to one of the former residents for almost double the price for square foot than any other apartment in the building. Happy end? But wait, there's more. A couple of weeks after moving, my uncle received a call from the very distraught new owner saying that the members of the HOA are harassing him and that Karen has threatened to sue him because the HOA has a new rule that all new owners must sign up for the HOA. My uncle verbatim said, "So, you're not part of the HOA and you don't need to give a crap about the rules they make." The new owner pauses as he processes the information. Yes. They chatted a bit, and the new owner, after enduring for years, was quite happy about the prospect of screwing with Karen and the powerless HOA. Update. How come the building didn't have a board already? Someone asked. Well, apparently the company that built the condo had gone belly up sometime earlier with the building virtually complete, and the company that liquidated it wasn't really concerned with stuff like that, only recovering money fast. That left the buyers to manage the property by themselves, or they were delegated to do so. One commenter, Bank4, suspects that Karen had an evil plan all along. Unethical life pro tip. Join a building with an HOA, consolidate power, and pass increasingly draconian rules until everyone wants out. Buy up all the apartments at a discount as the rats flee the ship. Once you own the whole building, dissolve the HOA and sell the units at a profit. That's a very interesting point of view. I'll ask whether she ended up buying even more units and update if I get an answer. No, Karen didn't get any more lots. Underwhelming, I know. A bit of a caller note though. Due to the high turnover, not many people know about my uncles a while after they moved. All they knew was that the owner of the big apartment on the top floor, they tell me it's called a penthouse, was not subject to the HOA. In the time that he lived there, a lot of rumors had him as some kind of big shot, either in politics or in crime. Great job, Uncle, standing up to the Karen who tried to run over everybody else, but you stopped it and left a legacy for that apartment. Awesome job. Beat the HOA with their own rules. Posted by Rakshas. I recently bought a house in a new development. I knew there was an HOA before going in, but unfortunately, due to my personal circumstances and how hard it is to find a house here in Florida, I had no choice about the matter, as much as I loathe HOAs. It's my intention to put up with their BS for 2 to 3 years, dig myself out, and move far away to a place that's never heard about HOAs. This being a new community, the builder is currently responsible for a lot of questionable decisions. One being planting a magnolia tree in the backyards of all the houses. For anyone that does not know, magnolia trees grow big. 30 to 40 feet in height is considered normal. Now, this being Florida, I didn't want such a huge tree in the yard near my house, especially during hurricane season. The builder said I would have to take it up with the HOA to replace the tree, as the area that I live in requires a tree in the backyard. Okay, no problem. I moved in and sent a request through the HOA property management website to replace the magnolia tree with the dwarf citrus tree. May as well get some fruits if I must have a tree in the backyard. They responded, no, I can only replace the tree from their approved list, conveniently attached. I scoured their list, not a single fruit in the list. I was beyond ticked. I read that list up and down, even put it through ChatGPT to see if I was missing anything. No fruit tree or plants. Okay, how about insect repellent plants? None of those either. To say I was beyond ticked is putting it mildly. I had read their CC&R before moving in, so I had an idea of what I was getting into. I stewed on it for a couple of days, and I was deciding to get a shrub from their approved list when I read their CC&R one more time. I found this gem. 4.58 Florida-friendly and drought-tolerant plants and landscaping materials. Notwithstanding any provision to the contrary in the governing documents, the association shall not be permitted to prohibit the use of Florida-friendly or drought-tolerant plants and landscaping materials within the community. I copied it and sent it to the property management company saying that I would like to replace the magnolia plant with a Florida-friendly plant as per the above section in the CC&R. Radio silence for a few days. I do believe I broke their petty little brains. Then I got the notice that my request was approved. I will gleefully go rip that magnolia tree out of the yard now and plant a grapefruit tree. I have since spoken with some of my new neighbors, and they have all expressed a desire to remove the magnolia tree from their yards for various reasons. I will gleefully point out the section of the CC&R that they should read. This neighbor just took down the HOA by reading the terms and conditions. Way to go, man. Garage door clicker stolen. HOA trying to make me cover for the replacement by hopeful outreacher. Okay, long one. About 3 months ago, the garage door of our condo broke and the HOA fixed it. Except now, the door is only capable of closing on its own without giving the ability for the residents to close manually, so no one waits for the door to actually close and drive off. Because of this change, our garage gets broken into all the time, and the shack that is next to our garage spot is usually open and all of its contents are placed all around. About 2 months ago, the previous board quit and couldn't find a third, so they urged everyone to volunteer. I ended up volunteering. A few weeks after being voted into the board, another break-in happened, and my garage door opener was stolen. I talked to the board, and we all agreed that it was a security issue to have an opener out in the wild. I told them that I could take care of things, as this seemed like a small enough issue to get my feet wet. Our HOA manager kept not responding to my emails, but still kept opening emails right away, and if and when he responds in small, unhelpful phrases weeks later. Our manager has a long history of doing that. I don't think she has ever replied to a single of my emails promptly. After about a month, I resigned from the board for unrelated reasons. Work was picking up and I needed the time back. It has been a month since I asked to resign, and they finally officially voted me out yesterday. The manager has not been responding to my emails still, even though I have receipts that she has indeed read every single one of my emails. The board now has decided that the issue is not important and wants to charge me $500 for the replacement clicker. After resigning, the resident living across from me told me that they had a stalker and that someone had installed a GPS tracker on her car. It feels to me they are trying to skirt their duties as members in order to save a dime and have me deal with the door by myself, even though they were the ones who created the problem by installing a cheap garage door that does not secure the building. I also feel like the HOA manager is singling me out in this situation. In the 2 years that I've lived here, she has never replied to a single one of my emails, often making problems worse due to them not being resolved in time. Thoughts? Not sure what to do next. Here's some updates. You don't need to be voted out to resign. Your written resignation is enough and effective immediately or effective per a date and time specified by you in writing. Was your garage door opener stolen during one of the break-ins? Because if so, I'd ask for the paragraph in the condo and HOA documents that gives them the authority to charge the victim of the HOA's negligence for the cost to repair the damage caused by the HOA's negligence. An OP updated. It was. We took photos of the events and contacted the board member immediately. We found a wrench in our car, found the shack to be opened second time at that point, and in addition, we noticed there was an opened box next to the garage door. Man, OP, if going to the HOA doesn't fix this, let's go to the cops instead. The HOA board president is a hoarder and stores trash under his staircase. Posted by No Organization 1286. My HOA is horrible. They do not want election rules. They refuse to take accountability for giving fraudulent financials and gave a crook of a manager a raise instead of canceling his contract. At the last meeting, they were talking about fining people for leaving items under their storage boxes instead of inside. Mind you, the inside of the storage boxes has leaks that the HOA has not fixed for more than 3 years. I'm generally a peaceful person, but this HOA has me livid. I can feel my blood boil. I snapped and I lost my mind. So, I decide to do a cleanup of the property. I went first to where the contractor left behind their trash, the unusable remnants of a fountain that was removed more than 2 years ago. I collected the musty towel that one of the previous board members, who doesn't let others use the spa, leaves for himself when he goes swimming. I put that in the trash. I took debris of planters. I took the sliding door that has been leaning against the building for literally 1 year. I removed the luggage that was left for someone to take, and I walked to Goodwill. And then I did the worst thing. I went beneath the staircase in the common area where the president stores her items that no longer fit in the condo. I knew it was hers, but I knew I could pretend it was trash. She had plastic containers in trash bags, like ate a grocery store salad, washed the container, and kept it. She has foam for going under the carpet. She had broken glass. I took it all. I went to the elevator room next, and I removed the passive-aggressive rules that the previous board had left in the entryway, covering the whole bulletin board. They were not allowing others to post and had all these rules that were in plastic but had been there so long that they had faded. I ripped it all out. I threw it away. It was like the best feeling in the world, like a drug. And then she had a meltdown and sent me an email called Cease and Desist from Placing Junk in Front of Complex. It has accusations that I was collecting personal materials and called the association's trash company. I think it's hilarious, and I know they will not be happy with me, and I lost political power, but honestly, FHOA, what a scam. I was so responsible. I put some in the trash, and I made a pile to pull out my car and take the bulky items to the dump. This was unacceptable to them, seen as wicked and mean-spirited. The secretary said if I ever vandalism his property again, he will file a police report. This comment says, boy, you sure showed them doing all that hard work for free. But was it worth it to do it for free to help get back at the HOA? This commenter with a Joe Gatto profile picture, loving practical jokers, I've seen Joe live before, says, post a camera that points to the stairs in case she tries to store more things and tries to say it's yours. No proof like video proof, right? OP has the guts to take out the trash. The trash in this case is the HOA. You should follow your own rules, posted by Jake Senpai. Anyway, so when I was 2, my dad bought the house that I grew up in. It was a major fixer-upper. In total, he probably put $100 grand into fixing it up, if not more. So this is where the story comes in. The city building inspector informed my dad that because it was documented that he spent over $50,000 improving his property, he would have to build a sidewalk, but only in front of his house. The expense would come out of his pocket. If anyone injured themselves on the sidewalk that abruptly started and abruptly ended, he'd be responsible for that as well, along with upkeep. It would also cut about 3 feet into the front yard and would permanently lower the property value. Now, at the time that this happened, the city had completely renovated a park playground costing well over the $50,000, and this was public knowledge. Also, the park was within viewing distance of our house, and it had 2 historic trees within feet of the road. My dad wrote a letter to the mayor's office and worded the cover letter in a way such that they would have to publicly read the entire letter out loud during a public meeting. The letter basically said to lead by example and put in a sidewalk at the newly renovated park, meaning they'd have to cut down the 2 historic trees. The public was outraged. After that, the building inspector basically let him renovate the house however he liked, and there is still no sidewalk. I love this malicious compliance. They need to follow their own rules and set their own example. Get 'em, man. Issues a fine without warning for street parking and having a memorial service with updates from OP, posted by Zethier99. We just moved into a non-gated HOA community in Florida. We had also moved my mother in with us to take care of her. Unfortunately, she passed the next week. Fast forward a week and we have a few family members over for a small memorial service. Next week, we get a letter from the HOA lawyer, who is also the president's nephew. It states we were being fined $400 by the lawyer for him sending us the certified letter. The letter stated, even though the county owns the roads, we disturbed the HOA president by having people park on the street. I've searched our CNRs and they do say no long-term street parking, but the HOA has been sued in the past over parking and lost. Not sure what to do. Thinking about making a bar complaint about the lawyer's actions and not giving us the required HOA board hearing for our violation. Beyond that, I'm not sure what to do. HOAs suck, and I'm stupid for buying into an HOA community. Commenter asked OP, if they're public streets, then anyone can park there, and where do they come up with $400? And it's for disturbing the HOA president? Are they more special than anyone else? I don't think on so many levels. And OP replies, $400 was for the attorney's time to send me the letter. I asked about a hearing with the board and was told it's a civil issue and there would be no hearing. I'll see if I can post the letter later today. I'm going to post the letter and emails when I redact some personal info. Sheriff stated they own the road enforcement and they have laws in our county about anyone else enforcing traffic and parking. The whole deal is a crap show. They lost a $30,000 legal battle last year, come to find out. Similar situation according to county documents. Funny they didn't learn the first time. With all the HOA stories I read on this channel, do they ever learn? Probably not. Towed my ex's car at her expense, posted by Shadow11Wolf50. Some details are vague because while I still feel ready to share this story, I still have PTSD flashbacks and anxiety fears of her popping up on my doorstep. Context that leads up to my petty revenge. This happened about 5 years ago. My ex-wife and I were married for about 2 years, together for 5. Things were declining in our relationship, badly. Well, my ex found another partner. I'll call the new partner NP. Instead of just leaving or starting divorce proceedings, they decided that I needed to be the bad guy so they could ride off into the sunset or something. I have mental health issues and that I was actively seeking a therapist for. I'm not saying that she had to stay and deal with my mental health issues. She gaslit, manipulated, and used my mental health against me. A side effect of most of my mental disorders is poor short-term memory. She would regularly say things that didn't happen, or I was remembering something wrong. My ex also had a new partner helping her as well. It was hard to tell what was up from down. They were both telling me I was a horrible person, and it was difficult to not believe it as it was already 2 versus 1. But they would also rope in mutual friends as well. This caused me to spiral worse than I already was, even though I was already in therapy to try to get better. They put me down constantly, told me I was fat and unattractive, killing what little self-esteem that I had left. My ex even told me one day that she had fallen out of love with me shortly after we got married. Everything hurt so much. Well, like any beaten dog, eventually I snapped and lashed out after a fight with my ex. It was one of the darkest moments of my life. She declared we were done. She told me she was moving out shortly thereafter. I was at rock bottom. She moved out a month and a half later and removed herself off the lease at the beginning of the following month. My ex didn't take everything with them, despite the fact that I didn't fight them. It was her stuff. More importantly, she left behind a $12,000 paperweight of a car that she was still making payments on. Thankfully, at the time that she got the car, I had seen how horrible the reviews were for that make and the model, and I wanted nothing to do with it. I refused to put my name on that vehicle, and I ended up being right. It wasn't even a year after she got it, the transmission was destroyed and there it sat in my driveway. For some context, my landlord had a clause in our lease against broken down vehicles just sitting on the property, and the city did too. So I kept on asking her when she was going to come and get it. I got the runaround. She'd say that she would come get it, then either went silent or pushed the day back. My ex even tried to convince me to lie and say it was mine. I flat out told her no. I didn't want to wind up in trouble for having a broken down car that wasn't even in my name. During this time, I ended up befriending a neighbor who was determined to dust me off and get me back up on my feet. I'll call her A. Well, between A and my therapist, they finally got through to me that I didn't deserve any of this and that she needed to get her crap already. Now for the revenge. Weeks of going back and forth with her to come and get her stuff. It was now over 30 days since my ex had been taken off the lease. The idea of her popping up whenever she wanted made me extremely anxious, and I vented to A. A pointed out that I could have the car towed. I got an idea and we plotted. I gathered up the last of her stuff from inside the house and I put it inside the car and then called the non-emergency number to report an abandoned car. They sent someone out and got my info and some of the info off of the car and then put a sticker on it. They said that the owner had 72 hours to remove it or I could remove it. I warned my ex one last time that she needed to come and get her car. Silence. 4 days go by and I still hadn't gotten anything from her to make plans to come and get this stupid broken down car. Enough was enough. I called a tow company and had them come pick it up. The best part was, it was at her expense. She would have to pay them when she finally decided to do something about the car. A filmed and took pictures while the tow guy loaded it up and sent it to my ex, giggling like a maniac the whole time. Once the car was gone, I felt a sense of relief that I hadn't ever felt before. My ex had zero legit reason to return to my house. My phone was blowing up within the hour from my ex, who suddenly had plans to remove the car that she had neglected to fill me in on. Now, bombarding me with angry texts stating that I was trying to ruin her life. I told her that I was not and that I had warned her repeatedly and she had ignored me and all I wanted was to be left alone. If I was the bad guy, fine, I accepted that. I then blocked her and locked down all of my social media. I felt like I could finally begin to heal and move on with my life. Not going to lie, it felt good to get some payback for the last 10 months that she had made my life heck. You can't put a lien on your house, not in your community. Posted by Tough Cookie 24/7. So this happened years ago when I was in elementary school, so maybe 15 years ago, and I was living in Florida at the time. Anyone who lives in Florida knows how often new gated communities just pop up. So our neighborhood was established and has been before I even moved into the house. The house once belonged to my uncle. We had a neighborhood watch, but no HOA. The gated community was finally built and the people were moving in. Now, we don't have a bad neighborhood, but we had some strange colored houses, lime green and magenta with giant metal lizards hanging all over it, is an example of one. Our house was simple, hand brick and half concrete painted white. It stood out compared to some of the other houses. The new gated community is an HOA community. They thought that they ruled over all. Soon, people in our neighborhood were receiving fines for their house color choices, their unsightly cars, not approved mailboxes, and other nitpicky things. My parents received some for my dad's boat being in the driveway, and even our unruly yard. We had a bougainvillea, which is vines, and which grows like crazy, and we were constantly trimming it. And we even got a fine for our fence. The old fence was chain link and the new fence was a wooden privacy fence. Don't ask why we had two different fences. My uncle only fenced in part of the house. It was still good fence, so my dad didn't want to rip it out. Well, my mom and dad would just pitch anything they saw coming from that gated community as they had fancy stationery. This went on for maybe 4 or 5 months. We would receive fines for not meeting HOA standards and other violations. We talked to our neighbors and they received them too. They tried to call and complain but were given the runaround and decided to pitch the mail as well. My mom received a phone call from her bank. They started to question her about the lien on the house that had just appeared in the system. My parents had less than a year left on their payments for the house. They always paid extra every month for the house loan and were always on time. My mom was super confused and said that there shouldn't be a lien. We don't have any reason for there to be a lien. Turns out the gated community filed liens on almost every house in my neighborhood. My mom told the bank the situation and called a lawyer. I'm not sure what all happened, but I know a lot of the members of that HOA faced felony fraud charges, and it was just a huge mess with a pretty big lawsuit against the HOA board. We were able to pay off the house after the lawsuit. We even had a big celebration on one of the roads, a huge cookout, and we met people that we didn't know before. I even made new friends with some kids that I didn't even know existed. People moved out of the gated community due to bad press, and a lot of the houses stood empty for a long time. When I moved away, there were still a lot of houses empty, and it was like a ghost town. Last I heard, the name of the community changed and the houses were being filled up. So I guess the lesson is, leave our bright houses alone and mind your own business. Nothing like a crooked HOA that tries to break the law get taken down with fraud. Late uncle's water bill through the HOA, posted by Monkey Basketball. My uncle passed away a little over a year ago. He lives in an area where the HOA either owns or controls the water pump for the surrounding area. I do not live in the state he resided in, and I haven't heard of this type of situation, but I imagine it's the norm in some communities. After he passed away, we discovered that while his water was still running, he had racked up a $20,000 water bill. The water bill is coming to us now since his death, with hefty interest, fines added on, all to be collected by the HOA itself. My dad, who is the sole heir of the property, has suggested a compromise to pay a quarter of what is owed. The HOA said they would convene to discuss. The group did come together and meet, and my dad was not present as he also lives across the country. They informed him after the fact that he was indeed responsible for the entire sum of the bill, plus the fees, which are still in hundreds of dollars in addition to the outstanding bill every month. They also went on to explain that my uncle was a difficult person to have in the area. He had unsavory people in and around the property, which sadly is the truth that we know of, and had to contend with ourselves as family members. Drug use and mental illness do not make for an excellent neighbor. However, it is stated in some of the documentation that my dad did receive that an unpaid bill for your water through this HOA would result in water shutoff. Never have we seen the water shut off in any of my dad's prior visits or subsequent long stay after his brother's passing, when he worked to rehab the house, as well as do an enormous amount of work to clean up the property. This in addition to preparing it for sale to a great prospective buyer who is quite literally waiting in the wings to purchase the home and property. My question is, what exactly would others do here? My argument, and I haven't thought it beyond this for a short time, is that some of the rules and regulations of the HOA are being adhered to, including charges and interest fees going to the property owner for unpaid or late water bills. And yet, the other rule that we believe exists, which says that a water bill unpaid for a certain amount of time will result in water shutoff, was a rule that they did not adhere to. In my mind, you cannot have it both ways. Not since my uncle's passing have there been any questionable visitors or tenants at the property, and it has been improved enormously. My dad is a sober veteran in his 70s who worked tirelessly for months with my brother and family friend to clean up the property and begin house renovations. There is a well-qualified buyer who owns the neighboring property waiting to complete this sale, finishing renovating the home and moving in with his family. And my dad, who hasn't even grieved his twin brother's death after being handed this mess, is really struggling. This is by far and away the largest reason the sale is at a standstill. Any ideas? Nightmare HOA stories. Jimpa87 says, mother-in-law was fighting stage 4 ovarian cancer a few years ago. Had no desire to take down our Christmas lights. We were constantly visiting the hospital and it was very touch and go. We had a child under 1 and it was a very emotional time. The HOA compliance officer constantly would stop at our house at all hours of the day. We had security cameras, so finally, after reviewing the footage, we called the guard shack to see what the emergency was. We were told that Christmas has been over for 3 weeks and we need to have our lights down before the end of the month or he would fine us $25 a day for the first week and then $50 each day after that. We explained the situation and the guy said, "Well, it's not my problem, take your lights down." My wife exploded on the D-bag. We went to the next board meeting and let loose on the board and the general manager. Turns out it wasn't an HOA policy. The guy worked for the security company that was hired to work the main entrance guard shack and would get a bonus if he would patrol and hand out fines for HOA violations. This butt would just drive around and make up his own rules and fines, and by the next meeting, he was fired and a new security company was hired when the contract was up in the summer. Everything worked out in the end. D-bag fired, mother-in-law cancer-free for over a year. Way to go, OP. Screw cancer, man. Cuckoo Kelly says, lived in a high-rise in Chicago that had an HOA full of old people with too much money. Fortunately, I was only renting, but I was curious to learn about the HOA, and they were gracious enough to let me sit in. The condo had just built a brand new outdoor patio for grilling and so on. The powers that be didn't like the shade of red of the cobblestone brick that they laid for the area, so they allocated $1 million to redo the entire area with new brick. There were a few attendees who were young professionals who protested, but they were heavily outvoted by the contingent of wealthy old people who felt this was a justifiable use of funds. Outrageous. Psych Nurse 6685 says, they charged me $500 for leaving a glass cup on the barbecue. Dang, I was ticked. My blood boils just thinking about it. I have so many other horrible stories, like my wall was flooded inside and they refused to fix it, even though it was an HOA problem. I pay $617 monthly. Screw them. Stuff People Say says, was told to have 10-year-old trees removed, which was apparently approved by the board. We found out, like all landscaping, because in the winter they turn brownish and lose the leaves. Also got a notice asking how long we'd have a Toyota Tundra truck in our driveway over Christmas. Our cousin stayed with us 2 nights. Nikadraw says, was moving to a different city and crashed at my dad's townhouse for a few months to save money for the move. One day, a guy showed up to install a satellite dish that my dad had ordered. My dad isn't the type of guy to pay very close attention to HOA rules and apparently missed a brand new and highly contentious rule that satellite dishes were eyesores and no longer allowed. So, just as the installer guy is getting up to the roof, this couple, the head of the HOA, they come sprinting from their townhouse across the street to shut it down, screaming bloody murder. I had absolutely no issue with not getting a satellite dish. It wasn't even my house, but these 2 HOA thugs were absolutely awful. The wife was just hurling insults at the installer guy and the husband immediately started climbing the ladder up onto the roof to kick the crap out of the installer guy. None of this was provoked at all. It just went from 0 to 100 miles per hour in no time flat, and this couple was out of control. Well, the installer guy eventually had enough of having racist insults hurled at him, and he came down the ladder and started a full-on brawl with the husband in my dad's driveway. The wife was screaming at the top of her lungs at me, a stoned couch surfer whose only contribution to this whole fiasco was to answer a door and let a guy on the roof. I still vividly remember being absolutely dumbfounded watching these 2 grown men beat the heck out of each other while I tried to communicate to my dad on the phone over the shrill sounds of some strange woman absolutely berating me for ruining the neighborhood. It was wild. Jeff Barge says, my dad was telling me a story about their HOA this week. A homeowner in their neighborhood had passed away and hadn't yet paid their HOA dues for the month. At the memorial service, the HOA president approached the mourning family and asked what their plans were for paying the back dues and for paying any dues until the house was sold. Simply amazing. Pigeon Shark says, my family has been part of one for maybe 5 or 6 years now, and they frickin' suck. We had to cut down a tree when we first moved in because its roots were cutting into the sewage pipes and backing up all of our drains. To do that, we had to get approved to cut it down, and that took a few weeks. So we couldn't take a shower or flush a toilet for like 2 weeks. They also keep telling us to power wash our driveway, so we did once. We haven't done it again, but they think we did. They also keep raising the fees and giving no reason for it. I would expect that if they were adding things into the neighborhood or fixing something, but they just took out a few fountains from the lakes and they don't keep outside lights on anymore, so they should be saving money. Also, you can only paint your house certain colors, and I don't think you can use sidewalk chalk in the neighborhood either. Boatload of Funk says, a friend of mine lives year-round in a luxury condo with a view of a popular ski slope. His buddy a few doors down is the HOA president. Just the 2 of them for the majority of the year. Nice and calm. Then, when ski season starts, hold on to your freaking hat. The East Coast millionaires don't shut the heck up with their complaints when they live there for 3 weeks. El Senor McQueen says, my parents modified the front porch, and now it was different from the other houses in the block. Once it was done, a middle-aged lady comes out of nowhere. I had never seen her before, nor has she ever talked to us before, to kindly warn us that we had just lost the right to vote on HOA or some crap like that, since we did an unauthorized modification. We replied with the equivalent of, okay, thanks. And once again, we haven't seen her ever since. It's like she crawled out of her lair to inform us that we lost a right that we didn't even use, as if it were a huge major offense. Screw that. Suze QP says, we have the HOA president from the Third Reich. This man is on such a power trip, you'd think he was running a massive gulag with the lives of 1 million peasants at his disposal. He protects even the most trivial information as if it were top secret intelligence and dispenses his own brand of justice with no regard for the actual rules. And he's a liar. At the last general HOA meeting, we sat for 40 solid minutes while he regaled us with this vague bullcrap stories about his years as a Special Forces officer in the United States Army. According to him, he's been shot twice, held for ransom in an undisclosed foreign heckhole, and awarded top secret military honors that he isn't allowed to talk about. Wait, what? Here's the thing though. He's maybe 5'5", weighs at least 350 pounds, didn't know how to break down the gym weightlifting equipment, and made a complete butt of himself by saluting a neighbor who came to the meeting late still wearing his BDUs. The neighbor, who works at the nearby military base, laughed out loud and said, dude, I'm an E4. Guess who got written up for leaving his garbage cans out? Click my next crazy HOA Karen compilation on your screen to continue your listening session. Thanks for checking this one out, and see you in the next one.